Hey everybody, it's me again talking about my favorite topic once again, brain and neuroscience. Everybody that knows me knows I'm really fascinated and have been. Man, science is just advancing so quickly, it's hard to not be. Anyway, today we're going to talk about a couple different parts of the brain. The first one being the cerebellum, also known as the reptilian brain or hindbrain. Basically, your cerebellum is and does control your automatic responses, so that's why it's known as the reptilian brain. It controls things such as brain-body connections, sensory processing, intercepting and encoding emotions, as well as coordinating your different movements. Next, we have our midbrain. Our midbrain basically controls things like reflexes, actions, and eye movements, as well as your automatic body movements. So basically, quick reflexes, sensory input, and boom, how are you going to respond, right? Then we have our cerebrum, also known as the forebrain or cortex, or cerebral cortex. And basically, the cortex has two parts, left and right hemispheres. Your right hemisphere engages in things like abstract thinking, and the right side does control the left side body movements. Then we have our left hemisphere, which controls logical thinking, sequential thinking, things like that. And it does control our right side of our body and our movements. Now, our cerebrum controls a lot of different, higher functioning things, such as, thought processing. We have that sensory input coming up, and we think about, how do we respond to this environment based on prior experiences, knowledge, education, senses. We take all of this data and we figure out what to do next, right? So higher thought processing, which obviously helps us to understand consequences a lot better as well. Things like planning, memories, logic and reasoning. It engages in your personality and your behaviors. You engage in language learning. So people who are linguistically intelligent, definitely have a lot of cortex neuron pathways. And then they control things like values, hope, and a sense of time, right? So here at the seat of our cerebrum, which is basically our cortex, right, and our higher thinking, is our dicephalon. Our dicephalon is known as our seat of our cerebrum, or also known as our interbrain. And it's known as our interbrain because it is the key relay center for sensory information, motor information, as well as cognitive functions, right? So it is basically taking all of this data, however way it's coming in, and it is figuring out what to do with that data, right? So within the dicephalon, it engages in things like sleep-wake cycles, arousal, right? So when we have those senses come in and we get aroused, fearful, excited, happy, jolly, whatever that arousal may be. It's also the gatekeeper, right? So it's taking them senses and figuring out what to do next. And it also sends signals to the endocrine system, which, for those of you who don't know, your endocrine system is what produces all of your different hormones. And basically, your hormones then dictate behavior. Because obviously, if you're releasing cortisol or adrenaline, it's going to put you into the fight or flight. Or, it might release a bunch of hormones to make you calm down. If you're not able to get away or fight or flight, you may have to disassociate, right? So here at the dicephalon, it does then release and figure out what endocrine system hormones will be activated, and that thus then determine our behavior. Now, in trauma, we have something known as the sequence of engagement. And based on the sequence of engagement, basically it says there are 4 parts or a 4-part series of how we're engaging with our senses. And basically it starts with the brainstem, then it goes to the dicephalon, then it goes to the limbic system, and then your cortex. So it goes bottom up, right, to the cortex. So the brainstem does include the encephalon, which basically means that any kind of sensory input data internal, right? So memories, physiological responses in our body that make us think a certain way, those types of things. And then we also have our 5 senses that are coming from the external world, right? So we have a twofold. So within the brainstem, we have our internal input and data. And then we also have our external coming from our senses. Then we move up to the dicephalon, which is basically known as where it regulates everything that's going to happen next. So we have all this sensory data and input coming up through our brainstem, coming up into our body, and we're sensing this and we're feeling this, and it is in the dicephalon. It's going to figure out, oh, do we need to get out of here? Are we safe? Can we send the neurons to our cortex to think about things, or are we in danger and we need to get out of here, fight, flight, disassociate, whatever that may mean. That's why the dicephalon is known as the regulatory, right? So we have our senses coming into the brainstem. It's going to the dicephalon, which is then going to regulate and figure out what to do next. And then it's going to send those to the limbic system, which is basically, your limbic system is known as your emotional brain. And here is where, based on our senses, right, we experience different emotions, and those emotions then are going to produce a chemical reaction, right, through hormones and different things, or maybe, a hot body temperature preparing us to fight or flight, right, or maybe cooling down if we sense, our body is overheated, things like that. The limbic system also is there to bring order, right? So it's going to help us figure out how to react based on what is coming up in through the dicephalon and all of our senses and our brainstem and all of this. And then based on our limbic system is going to figure out what to do next. And it's either going to tell us we got to get the heck out of there and we're not safe, and it's going to send it to the amygdala, and then the amygdala is going to figure out what to do next, or it's going to send them to the cortex and say, hey, we're cool, we're safe, we can logically think about this, figure out what to do next, so on and so forth. Now, this is where I definitely think it's important to point out that people with a lot of trauma or PTSD, especially like combat veterans, or people that are in a lot, repeated trauma throughout their life and things like that, that when they get this sensory input coming up through the brainstem at that dicephalon, when you hear a trigger, a sound, maybe a loud gunshot or explosion, or, just something that, or a smell that's going to take you, because remember, emotions, senses, emotions cement with senses. So when you have a strong emotion, and we're sensing that, that's going to cement a memory into our mind, right? So now you hear this loud noise, and it's coming up to your brainstem through one of your five senses. Could be hearing, could be smell, whatever that is to you, and that it's immediately sending it to that dicephalon, and that dicephalon is relating that back to so many other times of being in maybe a combat, experience or whatever, and it's telling you, hey, we got to go now. It's not even sending those neurons up to your neocortex or prefrontal cortex to think if the ways we're going to be acting or engaging are even correct. So I think it's really important to point this out because, I think a lot of people, when they view trauma or PTSD, they look at it as something like about being damaged or something like that. And it is not at all. This is, this is science. What's great about science is science can always be altered, improved, advanced, all of this great stuff, right? So there's definitely things you could do. However, we got to get it back to the point where you're experiencing these senses and you're not experiencing them to the degree or associating them back to the war or the traumatic event. So whether that is, desensitization, EDMR, reprocessing therapy, meditation, bottoms up approach can help recreate that mind body and take away the senses to that traumatic memory, so there's lots of different things we can do with this. But I think it's important to also recognize, that obviously this is why people with a lot of trauma or people that may been in a lot of combat zones are impulsive, right? Because they are bypassing the neocortex, which is what we all need to be the most successful in life, right? So definitely some interesting stuff here. With that being said, I'm gonna end out the video with Dr. Amen. I love him. I heard that veteran video with the 83,000 brain scans or whatever, 7 or 8 years ago. And ever since, I was already fascinated by the brain and neuroscience. But since then, it's just like 1,000 times more, right? But anyway, he talks about 10 different things we can do to have the most healthy brain, to give us the best chances of success and good health, right? So he says, basically, these are brain wellness or just wellness in general. So rate on a 1 to 10, right? So he says brain diet. right? Obviously, we know everything that we put into our mouth is going to affect, our body. That's why it's important to have maybe a test to figure out, are you allergic to different foods? Are different foods harder for you to digest? That kind of stuff. Are you getting healthy nutrients? Are you living off fast food, right? So brain diet. Then we got our ants, right? So for people that aren't familiar with ants are basically our automatic thought processes. So it's kind of like, are you negative? Are you controlling those negative thoughts? Are you recognizing, when I get heated or I get shaky, I'm like, I need to just step away because this is telling me that I'm probably going to start thinking and behaving in negative ways, right? So be assessing that, how are your thoughts? 3, exercise and movement. Everybody knows that both weightlifting and cardio, different things, are awesome, as well as if you could pair them with nature, right? So definitely exercise and movement, super important. Then he says nutrients and vitamins, right? He does have on his site where you can go there and he will basically do an assessment based on your brain type, and then you figure out, and he can customize vitamins and stuff for you specifically. But just talking to your doctor and having those conversations and figuring out what's best for you, right? So nutrients and vitamins, if you're lacking milk, are you taking your, calcium and other means, right? Next is peer groups. Obviously we know that our environment affects us as much as we affect our environment, right? So be thinking, are we in supportive environments, work, relationships, family, and if not, can we try to maybe take a step back a little bit, or, whatever's needed to just have healthy environments around us. Then he talks about your clean environment. I know that currently I'm kind of displaced, so I have stuff everywhere right now, and in my brain I have to sort of block out what's around me because there's not really a way I can organize right now, but it is definitely affects my mental health, right? So making sure your environment is clean and orderly and organized. Then sleep. Obviously we know sleep can affect everything. It can affect your mental sleep. And food can affect every area of your life, right? If you're not getting sleep, obviously you're going to be in a bad mood. You're going to be more touchy. You might be more paranoid, all kinds of stuff. So that's a whole nother topic. Then head protection, right? So my father fell off of a roof, basically lost 30 years of his life. I don't even think sometimes he knows who we are, sometimes he may not. You just never know. It's just a pretty crazy thing, right? So be thinking about, especially, if you're a combat veteran, we know that just the hearing, right? The gunshots without the proper ear protection, which that's a whole nother lawsuit, right? We won't go on that topic, but, the brain trauma from hearing, from explosions, from, car accidents, from football, from sports, whatever you name it, be thinking about head protection. How's your head protection? New learning. Super duper important. It's been proven through tons of research that engaging in new cultures, people, experiences, pieces of knowledge, whatever, that learning can absolutely create neuron pathways all over your brain and really help to form those parts of your brain that maybe could have been stunted or underdeveloped, or even if they weren't, even help increase that, right? So learning a new language, artistic efforts, anything new, right? And then lastly, stress management. So how do you handle stress? Do you do journaling, yoga, meditation, therapy, exercise, gamer, what is that to you? So we'll go over those last 10 one more time. So we have our brain diet, controlling our ants, exercise and movement, nutrients and vitamins, peer groups, clean environment, sleep, head protection, new learning, and stress management. Thank you, Dr. Amen, and thank you, everybody. I hope everybody stays safe out there, and definitely knowing and understanding more about your brain, and not just, disorders, personality, any of that aside. This is neuroscience, this is a science that actually can be treated through lots of different ways. So never hesitate to reach out when you need somebody to talk to. I'm always here for anybody that needs somebody to talk to. God bless.